You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I remember the first time I saw Melissa like it was yesterday. It was a Friday night, a high school playoff game in Lincoln. I was standing on the sidelines, barking out orders to my team, when a stray football came hurtling toward the bleachers. The crowd gasped. I saw her, camera in hand, looking up, completely unaware of the ball coming her way. Instinct kicked in. I didn't even think, I just moved. I dove forward, slamming into her just as the ball slammed into the spot where she'd been standing. We both went tumbling to the ground, me on top of her, tangled in a mess of limbs and awkward angles. Her breath hitched when we hit the ground. She looked up at me, wide-eyed and breathless. "You saved me," she said, laughing, the surprise still written on her face. "Guess that's what coaches do," I replied, still catching my breath, trying to play it cool. "You all right?" She grinned. "Yeah, you're fast, quick hands." I offered her a hand, pulling her up. Her hand was warm in mine, firm. A photographer's hand, steady. The kind of hand that holds onto the world in a way I'd come to appreciate. "You know," she said, dusting herself off, "I think I might need a follow-up piece. A coach who can save lives. We could talk about it sometime." I chuckled. "Sure, give me your number and we'll see if I'm good for an interview." She smiled and handed me a business card, her fingers brushing against mine for a second longer than necessary. We texted later that night, then the next day, then the day after. We met for coffee the following week, then dinner a month later. It was easy. The conversation flowed like it always had, like we'd known each other for years. A year after that we were married, no big wedding, just a quiet ceremony with a few close friends and family. Melissa had her business, sports photography, and I had my career as a coach. We were solid. My world felt right. The next few years felt like a steady climb, building something together. I kept coaching, and she built her business. Road trips, lake fishing, talks about kids. We even started talking about a house. And then came the offer, the big break. A contract with a national sports magazine. I didn't think much of it at first, just a step up, a few more trips here and there. But it wasn't long before those trips became longer and longer. Basketball finals, international soccer tournaments, finally the stadium renovation series in Chicago. She was gone for months at a time, sometimes 6 weeks. I didn't complain, I understood. It was her dream. But I started noticing changes. At first it was subtle. She was more tired when she came home, more distracted, less present. We'd try to talk about things, about life, about us. But her mind would drift. When I'd ask about her work, her answers would be vague, about how things were busy or how she had a new project. It didn't take long before I realized she was mentioning one name over and over, Brian, her professional partner, as she called him. At first, it didn't raise alarms, but the praise, it was excessive. Always how great Brian was with the logistics, how easy he made things, how much fun they had working together. I remember one night, she was home for a few days, the first time in months. We were lying in bed, and I asked her, "How's Brian?" "You two seem to be working well together." She smiled, eyes fluttering closed. "He's great. We're making progress. He's really easy to work with." "Easy to work with?" I repeated, trying to make sense of it. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "He just makes things smooth. We get along well." I nodded, unsure of why it felt off. "That's good. Glad you've got someone who gets it." That was the extent of the conversation. Just a little exchange, but it gnawed at me. It kept coming back every time we'd talk, every time Brian's name came up. The longer the trips went on, the more it seemed like it was only her and Brian against the world, and I wasn't part of it. A part of me wondered if I was being paranoid, if maybe I was reading too much into things. But deep down, something didn't sit right. And yet, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be the guy who accused his wife of something without proof. I didn't want to be the guy who ruined everything because of jealousy. But I was noticing. I noticed how she seemed so much more distant now, how she'd come home and act like she was still with me. But the spark wasn't there anymore. And I noticed how she talked about Brian, the way her eyes lit up when she mentioned him. I had a choice. I could confront her. I could bring it all up. But I didn't. I stayed silent. She was happy. She was chasing her dreams. and I didn't want to ruin that. Instead, I kept being the guy who helped make everything happen. I kept up with my coaching career. I kept doing my part, doing what was expected of me. I was still Jack Turner, the guy with a stable job, the steady husband, the man who had it all under control, and I had to keep it that way. But things were changing. I could feel it. I just didn't know how deep it ran yet. The message preview lingered in my mind as I watched Melissa leave. Still taste you on my lips. Her words, his words, the betrayal. I hadn't let myself fully process it. Not yet. Maybe because it felt too clean, too final. There was no mess, no confrontation, just the truth laid out in text messages and photos, and everything falling apart. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye, just like any other trip. No change. She looked at me like nothing was different. I kissed her back, feeling the hollow echo of the kiss I had given to a woman who was no longer mine. But I didn't say anything. Didn't ask if she had everything packed. Didn't ask if she'd remembered her laptop or her charger, because none of that mattered anymore. She drove off to the airport, and I waited until the sound of her car faded away down the street. Then I moved. I walked to my office, sat at my desk for a moment. The sun was barely up, still crawling over the horizon, painting the room with a soft orange glow. I opened the laptop and logged into the bank account. My heart thudded in my chest, slow and steady. I didn't hesitate. I transferred half of everything she and I had built together. Gone. No confrontation, no screaming match, just the quiet click of keys, and that was it. I packed a bag, just the essentials, a few shirts, a jacket, some jeans, a toothbrush, my life in a duffel bag. No plans, no destination, just an escape. I grabbed my resignation letter, typed up in a matter of minutes, and set it on my desk. Clean and simple, a few lines, done. Then I called my brother. He was always the practical one, the guy who would never question the choices I made. He'd just nod, offer a few words of advice, and leave it at that. I'm heading out, I told him. I need to disappear for a while. He didn't ask why, didn't need to. I left a note. You're right, it's time. That's all it said. He'd get it, he'd understand, even if I didn't explain. I shoved the note into an envelope and dropped it on the kitchen counter. I wasn't coming back, not to this house, not to this life. The truck was waiting in the driveway, the one I'd had for years but never used much. Now it was mine, and I was leaving Lincoln behind. I drove west, no specific place in mind. I kept my hands on the wheel, steady and firm, the engine humming beneath me. The road stretched out before me like it always had, but now it felt different. It wasn't just the open road, it was my new life, the life I chose. I didn't look back, not even once. By the time I reached the mountains, my truck had started to sputter. I pulled off at a small diner, trying to ignore the tightening in my chest. I'd been on the road for hours. The landscape around me looked wild and untouched, like the kind of place I could get lost and never be found. The mechanic in the diner parking lot had told me it was the fuel pump. It'd take a couple of days for him to fix it, a couple of days. And that was fine. I'd never been in a rush. A small mountain town was just up the road, so I found my way there. The next day I walked into an outfitter store to see if they needed any help. They did. They hired me to help with customers, selling gear, and giving advice. I had no experience, but I'd been around the outdoors long enough to know the basics. It was a start. It wasn't much, but it was something. Samantha, the woman who ran the lodge, was confident, pragmatic, and just a little bit rough around the edges. She wasn't here to coddle me, but she wasn't here to babysit either. First rule around here, she said when I started, is you do your job and stay out of the way. You can't get lost in your head. The mountains won't wait for you. I nodded. Seemed simple enough. She watched me for a few days. I guess I wasn't easy to read. Maybe my silence was too loud. Or maybe it was the way I kept checking for shrapnel. She'd said it once when she noticed how I carried myself. You're still checking for shrapnel, she said one night, after a long day of guiding a group through the trails. I didn't respond right away. Are you going to talk about it? She added. I looked at her, trying to figure out if she actually cared. Number, not yet. Samantha just nodded, like she already knew. She didn't push it, but I could feel her eyes on me now and then. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. For the first time in what felt like a long time, I wasn't the guy who had to hold everything together. I wasn't the one expected to fix everyone's problems. It felt strange, in a way that I didn't have words for. This was the life I had chosen, the life that was mine now, whether I was ready for it or not. So, I kept moving forward, one day at a time. I stayed busy, I stayed quiet, and I waited. For what exactly? I didn't know, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I wasn't looking back. Not at Melissa, not at my old life, not at any of it. I had nearly a year of silence, no contact, not from her, not from anyone who might know where I was. I kept it that way. I let the months stretch out like the landscape around me, empty, cold, distant. I wasn't hiding, not really. I was just disappearing into the noise of the world, making sure no one could find me, not even if they tried. Samantha let me be. She noticed the tension in me, of course. I didn't hide it well, but she never pushed. Sometimes I'd see her watching me as I loaded fishing gear or set up camp, and she'd shake her head, muttering something about still checking for shrapnel. I wasn't sure how much she understood, but it was obvious I wasn't whole. Still, she kept her distance. If I wanted to drown myself in the wild, she'd let me, but she also knew how to pull me back when I needed it, when I was on the verge of slipping too far. The days bled into each other. I grew stronger, leaner. My body, used to a certain rhythm of exhaustion and stress, adapted to the slow, deliberate pace of mountain life. I found my peace in solitude. It wasn't so much that I wanted to be alone. It was more that I needed to be for a while. But then, that afternoon in December, it happened. She walked into the lodge like a ghost, suitcase in tow. Melissa. I froze when I saw her. I'd been expecting something like this, but not today. Not this way. She wasn't supposed to be here, and yet there she was, standing in the doorway, like she hadn't been the one to shatter everything I had once held together. I didn't say anything. I didn't even move, just stood there, behind the counter, feeling like a weight had settled onto my chest. Excuse me, she said softly, glancing around. I need a room, for one. For a moment, all I could do was stare at her. Her eyes were tired, sunken, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messier than usual, and the way she held herself, like she was trying to disappear, made my stomach twist. I should have told her to leave. I should have told her to turn around, go back to whatever life she was running from. But I didn't. I was professional. I always had been. I gave her a key. It's room 4B, down the hall. I didn't smile, didn't offer her anything more. She nodded, still looking at me like she wasn't sure how to speak. I felt the tension between us like a physical thing, thick and suffocating. It was everything I'd avoided for a year, all bundled up into a single moment. But I stayed silent, waiting. I was done with the lies, done with pretending. As she turned to walk away, Samantha came into view. Her eyes flicked between Melissa and me, and she raised an eyebrow. "You want me to throw her out?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. I shook my head. I didn't want that. Not yet. "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's time to face this." Samantha didn't push me. She just gave a short nod, and then she turned back to the front desk to take care of the other guests who had been trickling in. I watched Melissa disappear into the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the space like she was walking away from something much larger than just a room for the night. My chest tightened again. I thought about walking after her. I thought about telling her to leave. I thought about everything I had planned to say when I finally saw her again. But in the end, I stayed where I was. I didn't follow her. I didn't have to. Not anymore. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the same spot on the counter. Eventually, the silence of the lodge stretched out around me, and I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected. Calm. It wasn't closure, not by a long shot, but it was a step closer to something I hadn't dared to face. When she came down for dinner, she didn't look at me. She didn't try to speak. It was like we were strangers sharing space, like the ghosts of who we had been had taken over our bodies and left the real versions of us behind. I didn't engage. I didn't ask her why she was there, or how she found me. I didn't need the answers. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, the hum of the fire in the fireplace, and the low murmur of voices mixing into the background. I was aware of her at the table, across from me, her eyes occasionally flicking up to meet mine. But neither of us spoke. Eventually, she left the dining area, her footsteps light and quiet as she made her way back to her room. I was left with the taste of something bitter in my mouth. It didn't feel like a reunion. It didn't feel like a chance to fix anything. It felt like a reckoning. And I was finally ready for it. The next morning, I didn't have to guess what she was going to say. Melissa sat across from me, eyes tired, but there was a steely resolve in them now. She wasn't here for a fight. She was here for answers. "I'm not here to beg for forgiveness," she said, her voice a little shaky but steady. "I just need to understand. Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me what was happening?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, but my mind was already 10 steps ahead. The words I'd been holding in for so long bubbled up. I wasn't going to lie to her anymore. I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. I was done. "You really don't know why?" I asked, keeping my voice even, but I could feel the heat of it in my chest. "You really need me to spell it out?" She opened her mouth to answer, but I cut her off. "I saw the texts, I saw the photos, everything. You think I didn't see what you and Brian were up to? That whole one last night thing you two talked about?" I took a slow breath, letting the words sink in. Her face went pale, her eyes wide, like she had just been slapped. She opened her mouth, but this time, nothing came out. "You're right," I said, more to myself than to her. I should have said something sooner, but I didn't want to be the one who made a scene, so I left instead. I didn't feel guilt, not anymore, only the sting of everything I had allowed to happen. Melissa finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Jack, I thought I loved him." She swallowed, her voice cracking. "But it wasn't love. It was selfish. I destroyed everything for something that wasn't real." I didn't respond. I wasn't here to offer her comfort. She didn't deserve it, not yet. She had to feel what I felt. She had to face it. She sat there in front of me, the weight of her own words crushing her. "I lost him, Jack. I lost my job. I lost everything. I had to sell our house. It's over. For everything. For us." I didn't say anything, but the words hung in the air like a fog. She left me that day, but she left a letter behind. A letter that, when I finally picked it up, said everything I needed to hear. Blunt. No excuses, just the truth. I didn't read it right away. I knew what it would say. I wasn't ready to hear it yet. The hours stretched on. My hands were restless, my mind going over every part of the last year. I kept thinking of the cabin, the fresh air, the quiet. I kept thinking of how everything would feel when I finally let it go. And then, finally, I opened the letter. The words were simple, cold. I thought I could make it work with Brian. I thought he could fill the space. But I was wrong. She lost everything. Her career, her house, her dignity. And now, she was left with nothing. I set the letter down slowly. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel anything. I had to remind myself that I wasn't the man I used to be, the man who would have fought for her, the man who would have done anything to make it work. But I wasn't that man anymore. I couldn't afford to be. I glanced at the clock. 3 days. She'd be gone in 3 days, and then, this time, she'd never find me again. It wasn't until late afternoon on her 3rd day that the storm hit. I'd been keeping track of the weather, but it was one of those things you don't think much about until you see it in the distance. Dark clouds rolling in, winds picking up. The temperature dropped, and the snow started to fall, light at first, then faster, like the world had decided to blanket everything in a hurry. The power went out by 6 p.m., cutting off the lodge from the outside world. The quiet that followed was thick, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're holding your breath. But that wasn't what got my attention. It was the missing person, Melissa. She'd gone out for a hike earlier in the day, saying she needed to clear her head. I didn't stop her. I figured it was best to let her walk off whatever guilt or frustration she was carrying. But when night came, and she still wasn't back, I started to worry. I tried calling her, but the signal was spotty, the wind carrying her voice away before it reached me. Samantha found me standing in the front lobby, looking at the door, hands clenched. "You know where she is?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Samantha said, her voice low, calm. "But I'm betting she's out there trying to prove something to herself." "Shit!" I was already moving toward the door. Samantha's hand shot out to stop me. "Jack, you're not going after her in a blizzard." I turned on her then, frustration pulling at my chest. "I can't just sit here, Sam." She didn't argue, just followed me out into the storm. The snow was thick, heavy flakes that whipped into my face and made it harder to see. I didn't care. I kept moving, stepping through the deepening snow, hoping she was close. The wind was howling now, and the temperature was plummeting. About a mile into the hike, I found her. She was curled behind a boulder, barely visible in the whiteout. Melissa was barely conscious, shivering uncontrollably, her skin pale and cold to the touch. I knelt beside her, trying to check her pulse, to see if she was still breathing. It was shallow. "Melissa," I called softly, my hand on her shoulder, trying to rouse her. "You're okay. Come on, talk to me." She didn't answer, her lips blue. She was slipping. I moved fast, pulling her up, wrapping my arms around her as best I could. "Don't do this," I muttered to myself, the words shaky. "Come on, don't do this." The weight of her body was too much. The blizzard was killing us both. But I wasn't going to let her slip away again. I couldn't. Not like this. With her half conscious, I dragged her back toward the lodge, stumbling through the snow, carrying her most of the way. Every step felt like the last, the cold creeping into my bones, the exhaustion weighing me down. But I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't stop. When we finally made it back to the lodge, I laid her on the floor by the fire, stripped her of the wet clothes, and wrapped her in blankets. I didn't leave her side. Samantha was already there, tending to her, checking her vitals, but her eyes flicked to me. "What the hell were you thinking, Jack?" I couldn't answer her. I was too focused on keeping Melissa alive. It felt like hours passed before she finally stirred, a soft groan escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me, disoriented. "Jack?" she whispered, her voice weak. "I'm here." I said it without thinking, without hesitation. She blinked, her breath shaky. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. But as she drifted in and out of sleep, my mind raced. What the hell had I just done? Why had I risked everything to save her? The phone call came late in the evening. I was sitting on the porch of my cabin, watching the sky fade from purple to black, when the name flashed on my screen. My brother. "Jack, it's bad," he said, his voice tight. "It's Melissa. She's been in a car accident. It's serious. She's asking for you." The words didn't sink in right away. It was like they were coming from someone else's life, not mine. I hadn't seen her in months. She'd been gone, and I'd built a life here, a life without her, without the lies, without the mess. But now, here I was, listening to my brother tell me she was asking for me. I sat back, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Is she alive?" The words tasted like I had to force them out. "She's alive, but it's bad, Jack. They don't know if she's going to make it through the night. She's asking for you. She says she needs you." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to feel. Melissa had been the woman who destroyed everything we'd built, and now she was asking for me in the middle of this mess she'd made. I sat there in the silence of the mountain air, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. "I'll go," I said finally. The decision felt like it was being made for me, not by me. There was no question. I was going, and that was it. The flight to Denver felt like a blur. A part of me was still locked in the mountain air, the life I'd made, the silence I'd come to treasure. But the rest of me, the part that had been buried in the past, felt like I was being pulled back into the noise. I landed in Denver late at night. The lights of the city felt like a different world, a life I had left behind. But here I was, walking through those same sterile halls, the same smell of antiseptic, the same cold air biting at my skin. The ICU was quiet, too quiet. I stood there for a moment outside the door, my breath catching in my chest. When I walked in, Melissa was lying there, bruised, bandaged, hooked up to machines. She looked nothing like the woman I once knew. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard my footsteps. She blinked at me, confusion and recognition dancing behind her eyes. "You came," she whispered, her voice rough, weak. "I came," I said, my voice flat. I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know why I was there, really, she swallowed, wincing from the effort. "Thank you," she said softly, her hand twitching as if she wanted to reach for mine, but she couldn't move. I know you've moved on. I know this is probably too much." I didn't say anything to that. I didn't know what to say. My life had moved on, hadn't it? It had to. But as I stood there, looking down at her, I couldn't ignore the knot in my chest. Her eyes looked up at me, searching for something. "I'm so sorry, Jack," she said, her voice cracking. I was selfish. I destroyed everything. I don't know how to fix it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was done trying to fix it. I was done with the lies, with the broken promises. But I was here. I couldn't ignore that. I was here. She closed her eyes, a shudder passing through her body. I didn't mean to lose you. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't want to say the things I was thinking. I didn't want to pour salt into the wound, even though she deserved it. I was standing at the edge of something, but I couldn't take the step forward, not yet. Melissa's eyes fluttered open again. There's something for you. She motioned weakly to the side table beside her bed, where an envelope sat. I wanted you to have it. It's important. I didn't ask her what it was. I didn't care. I picked it up, turned it over. There was no explanation, no words on the outside, just a simple envelope. She gave me a faint smile, then winced in pain. Please, just take it. It's for you. I stood there for a moment, looking at the envelope, then back at her. I didn't open it. Not then. I wasn't ready. I have to go, I said quietly, my voice steady. It was time to let go. Time to leave her in this hospital bed, and time to walk away for good. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded slowly. I understand, she whispered. I turned and walked out, leaving the ICU behind. I didn't look back. In the hotel room, I sat with the envelope in my hands. I didn't know why I was hesitating. It was just an envelope, but something about it felt too much like a tether, like it was pulling me back into a life I wasn't ready to return to. I opened it slowly. Inside, there were property transfer papers, a hunting cabin, hers it seemed, but now mine. A note inside read, "No strings attached, just a peace offering. Take it or leave it. It's yours no matter what you decide." I sat there, staring at the papers. The decision felt final, like it had been made long before I had the chance to choose. It was hers, but now it was mine. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight of that decision settle on me. I didn't have to go back. I didn't have to return to the life I'd walked away from. I'd built something new, and this cabin, was the last piece. I'd accept it, but on my terms. The moment I saw the envelope, I knew I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. I had just stepped off the plane in Denver, my heart still a little too tight. The trip had been a blur. ICU visits and hospital lights. Melissa, bruised and bandaged, asking me to stay. A few weak words, a goodbye that still felt incomplete. She'd given me that envelope with a kind of finality. No words, just a look in her eyes. I hadn't wanted to ask her about it. I didn't want to pry into the remains of a life we'd both left behind. I'd seen enough. I wasn't there to fix things. I wasn't there to try and rekindle anything. Back in my hotel room, I dropped the envelope onto the desk and stared at it for a while. The papers inside would change things. Again. She knew it, I knew it, but it didn't matter. I finally gave in, sitting at the desk and tearing open the seal. Inside, I found a set of property transfer papers, just one document, a small hunting cabin in the mountains. It had a rustic charm to it, from the look of the place. Not too big, but big enough to get lost in. I looked at the papers for a long time, my fingers tracing the words. Her name, crossed out in favor of mine. Her handwriting in the note, small, neat, no strings attached, just a peace offering. Take it or leave it. It's yours, no matter what you decide. The words weighed on me, a little heavier than I'd expected. She was trying to give me something, but it wasn't the apology I thought it would be. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was just offering a way out. A way to move on from everything. Part of me wanted to tear the papers up, toss them aside, and walk out of that hotel room for good, leaving it all behind. But the other part of me, the part that had taken up residence in the mountains, away from her, away from the life I'd known, was already reaching for them, already thinking about what this cabin could mean. It could be a new beginning, no more broken promises, no more lies, just a place to breathe, just a piece of something she'd left behind, something she couldn't take with her. I stared at the papers for a long time before making a decision. This wasn't about her, it was about me. It always had been. I folded the papers back into the envelope and stood up, moving toward the window. The city lights below looked like they were a lifetime away. I didn't belong here anymore. I had my life in Wyoming. I had everything I needed. I was done with the past. I was done with her. But I'd take the cabin. It was mine now, on my terms. When I got back to Wyoming, I found Samantha waiting. She was perched on the porch, looking out at the setting sun, her expression unreadable as usual. I walked up, the envelope still in my hand. "You look like you've made up your mind," she said, not looking at me. "I have," I replied. "I'm staying." She finally turned her gaze to me, a slow, knowing smile curling on her lips. "Good. You should. You've earned it." I nodded. And I realized then that she was right. I had earned this. Not just the cabin, but the life I was building. It wasn't much, but it was everything I wanted. I put the envelope down on the table next to her, watching her for a moment before sitting down beside her. "Thought about taking a job," she said casually. "We're looking for someone to teach up at the Mountain Rescue Center. Could be a good fit for you." My mind raced, thinking of the years I'd spent coaching, working with kids. I'd spent so long being someone else's mentor, someone else's guide. Now, it was time to be my own. "Maybe," I said, leaning back in the chair. "I'll think about it." "You've got time," she replied, the last rays of sunlight slipping beneath the horizon. I let out a slow breath, a weight lifting from my chest. Maybe it wasn't just the cabin that was a new beginning. Maybe it was everything that came with it. "You're right," I said finally. "I think it's time." I wasn't going back to the old life. That life was done. But I was ready for what came next. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. A new path, one I chose. And that felt like everything. It's funny how you think you've hit rock bottom, but then life shows you there's still more to fall. I never thought I'd come back from it. The betrayal, the anger, the numbness, but I had. Not that I was ready to forget it all. No, I wasn't that kind of guy. I wasn't about to pretend it never happened. But I had learned something in those months of isolation. Learned that there was more to life than what I'd been clinging to. Samantha and I stood on a ridge one evening, the sun just dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and reds. The world stretched out below us, vast and open. It felt different than any view I'd had before, not because it was some postcard perfect landscape. It was the same land I'd been driving through for months. But the way it felt now, as the last rays of sunlight hit the ridges and the cold crept in, I felt peace. Real peace. Not the kind you run from. The kind you find when you stop running. "You look like you've got your head on straight," Samantha said, her voice steady but not unkind. "I do," I said, my voice matching hers. "I've got a better grip on things now. I'm not who I was a year ago. And I'm not going back to that life, not the life I had before. I'm not going back to her either." She nodded slowly, the wind picking up around us. "Guess it's about time you stopped looking over your shoulder, huh?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I had stopped looking over my shoulder a while ago. I'd gotten used to the weight of the past, had learned to carry it instead of letting it carry me. "You ever think about what you want next?" Samantha asked, her voice pulling me out of my thoughts. "Sometimes," I said, "but I don't think I need to know yet. I'm okay with figuring it out, one step at a time." "That's one way to do it," she said with a small grin. She stood up straighter, her expression shifting to something more open, less guarded. "You know, I've been thinking, there's a position open up at the Mountain Rescue Center. They need an instructor. Might be a good fit for you." I looked at her, taking in her words. The cabin was mine now, and I had a steady job at the lodge. But an instructor position? It felt like the next piece, the one I hadn't known was waiting for me. "An instructor, huh?" I thought it over for a minute. "Sounds like something worth considering." She smiled, that same pragmatic confidence in her eyes. "You've already helped me, Jack. You've got the skills, you've got the patience, and now you've got the space to really figure out what comes next." I stood up, the cool wind running through my jacket, and looked out over the horizon again. There was a certain calmness to the thought of this job. It wasn't about fixing anything. It wasn't about making amends. It was about doing something real, something that mattered. I hadn't had that in a long time. "I think it's time to stop running," I said quietly. "Time to settle into this life." She let out a low laugh, a sound that felt warm despite the chill. "Figured you'd say that." And I meant it. This wasn't just about finding a new job or a new place to live. It was about finding the life I wanted, the life I was choosing. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, feeling the weight of it all settle into the right place. This wasn't the life I thought I'd have, but it was mine. I wasn't going back to the old me. I'm not returning to the past, I said, my voice steady. This is the life I've chosen. The silence between us felt like an agreement, one that didn't need to be spoken aloud. The sun had set completely now, leaving the sky a deep, almost purple black. The stars were coming out, and for the first time in a long time, I could see the outline of a future that didn't come with a past to drag along. Samantha gave me a nod, and we walked back toward the lodge. The new life waited.